Good morning, everyone. So we are about to begin the session 2 of the benign lesions of the uterus, the leiomyoma uterus. First of all, let me congratulate you all for your successful completion of pre-final exams. And as I could see in the results, it was 94%, so it's quite a good result for our college. The second point is that, as in discussion with your class representative, we will be discussing the answers to the quiz which was held on Monday. So after this session, we can just run out the questions, and if you have, I would be on the microphone, and if you have some queries, you can write on the chat box, and we can just go through the answers. Okay, so let us now begin with the session. Today's session is on the benign lesions of the uterus, the part 2. As we saw in the last lecture that to define leiomyoma, it was basically a benign tumor of the uterus which was composed of smooth muscle cells and the fibrous connective tissue. So it has two elements, the fibrous connective tissue element and the smooth muscle element. We also saw that the risk factors to it were age. It was basically a tumor of about reproductive age group, that is 1, and that was late reproductive age group, about 35 to 45. The Africans, the Asian Africans were more predisposed to it, and those who maintained a good lifestyle with a good diet and exercise, they were less exposed to it. Early menarche with more of estrogen exposure predisposes to it. Nulliparity with more of estrogen exposure predisposes to it. Use of oral contraceptive with high dose of estrogen predisposes to it, and high fat in the diet and obesity were the predisposing factors, and of course it runs in families. Seeing to the types, in the last class we discussed that the intramural or interstitial type was the most common, since it was the muscular tumor of the uterus. And it has a genetic component, and the environmental and other risk factors cause a single cell of the myometrium to undergo certain changes, so that under the influence of estrogen and progesterone and other tumor growth factors, it becomes a fibroid. We also saw in the last lecture that the FIGO has classified by palm coin classification as leiomyoma, and very good classification. In fact, the only classification in the palm coin is given to leiomyoma. So in primary there is no leiomyoma, in secondary they divide into submucous and others, and in tertiary they divide it into 8, out of which 4 is completely intramural and 8 is completely others, that is not confined to uterus, it is confined to either cervix or it is parasitic. We also saw that when it is a large myoma, how do you write it? Also, to notify, the notation says that when it is submucous you write as LSM, and when it is apart from submucous you write LO, that is others. We discussed that when you cut the section and you see it on a microscope, you see that it comes from the individual cells, and these individual cells are spindle shaped like these. They are spindle shaped like in this section. They are spindle shaped cells. They are all uniform cells looking alike, but the pattern of arrangement is a whorl shaped, and so they are arranged. These smooth muscle cells are arranged in bundles running in different directions and mostly in the forms of whorls, and of course they have in between them there is a fibrous connective tissue. Coming to capsule part, we know that there is a pseudocapsule. See this myoma, and when you do a surgery, you can remove this pseudocapsule and you can enucleate the myoma from it. So this is a capsule, and arteries run in this capsule area. Now coming to today's lecture. So today we will be discussing the diagnosis, how to diagnose the leiomyoma by signs and symptoms, how do you do the pelvic examination, what investigations do you do by imaging. You can do an ultrasound, you can do a diagnostic hysteroscopy, you can do an MRI and hysterosalpingography. We will also be discussing degenerations of the fibroid, which mainly comes in these forms. So starting with clinical symptoms. Most of the fibroids are asymptomatic. you may say that about 50 to 70% of the fibroids are a chance finding. Of the symptoms, abnormal uterine bleeding is the most common symptom, and therefore we have placed it in the AUB classification of AUBL. And out of which, heavy menstrual bleeding and intermenstrual bleeding both are common symptoms of fibroids. Pressure symptoms, depending upon the size of the fibroids and where it is producing its effect, there can be pressure symptoms. Pelvic pain, most of the fibroids are painless, but there we will see what fibroids cause pain. There is a sense of bulkiness or the sense of heaviness in the lower abdomen, and therefore because of the solid tumors they form a bulk symptoms. They can distort the abdominal wall cavity. They can produce reproductive challenges, subfertility, infertility, recurrent abortions. We will be dealing with this. Because of the heavy menstrual bleeding, there may be a feature of anemia. And when fibroids occur in a lower reproductive age group, that is in lower age about 25 to 30 years, and pregnancy is associated with it, then complications of pregnancy related to fibroid. So, dealing with it one by one, the asymptomatic fibroids, about 50 to 75% of the fibroids are asymptomatic, and they are discovered accidentally during routine examination or investigation. Say for any other disease you are investigating and you do a sonography and you find a fibroid, or the patient comes with a complaint of heaviness, something which is producing her pressure symptoms, and then you do a sonography and you accidentally find fibroids. So most of the fibroids are painless, most of the fibroids are asymptomatic, and therefore it is a chance finding. Most of the fibroids, when they are small, you just have to wait and watch. And that is you have to do a investigation from time to time, say every 6 months, and the preferable investigation in that case is sonography, which is also a cost-effective screening. So for a very small fibroid which is asymptomatic, you just have to wait and watch and do a timely sonography and see that whether it is increasing in size or producing symptoms. Sonography can miss some small fibroids which are less than 2 cm in diameter. But size is not the only thing. The site of the fibroid is also more important. We will be seeing that a small fibroid which is submucous may create more symptoms than a large fibroid which is subserous and may be asymptomatic. If by chance finding you find a asymptomatic fibroid after menopause, you can leave it undisturbed or untreated. Then coming to symptoms. When you come to symptoms, abnormal uterine bleeding, heavy menstrual bleeding, intermenstrual bleeding is a very common symptom, and therefore you classify under the palm coin classification of FIGO as AUBL. In 1/3 of the cases, that is 30% of the cases, the patient may present with heavy menstrual bleeding. So this is the most common symptom. It is the most common symptom of leiomyoma. It is the most common symptom if submucosal component is there in the leiomyoma. Now, what are the causes of this heavy menstrual bleeding? Various causes have been depicted, and the one cause which is said, the first most important, is there is an increase in the endometrial surface area. Normal surface area of the endometrium is 15 square centimeters. And with the fibroid along it, so much so it is stretched that the endometrial surface area can increase up to 200 square centimeter. The second is endometrial hyperplasia. That is high concentration of estrone and estrone sulfate activity in the endometrium overlying the myoma is the cause. Increased vascularity of the uterus, that is increased endothelial growth factors, VEGF, is one of the causes of heavy menstrual bleeding. Fibroids, if present, interfere with the normal contractions of the uterus as well as the normal contractions of the spiral arterioles, which are present in the basalis portion of the endometrium, and therefore when they cannot contract, the blood pours into the cavity and therefore causes heavy menstrual bleeding. Overall, there is a pelvic congestion because of lots of blood flowing it, and therefore that may be a cause of heavy menstrual bleeding. Compression and dilatation of the venous plexuses within the myometrium and endometrium with resulting endometrial venule ectasia leading to profuse bleeding is a cause. And prostanoids also play a role where there is a deficiency of thromboxane A2 and imbalance between thromboxane and prostacyclin. So these are some of the causes which may contribute to heavy menstrual bleeding in cases of leiomyoma. Also, there is a feature of irregular menstrual bleeding. That is, apart from the menstrual bleeding, the patient may menstruate off and on between the cycles, and this is basically because the endometrium over the myoma starts to ulcerate, mostly in cases of submucous fibroid or fibroid polyp. Or there may be cases where there are torn vessels from sloughing of the base of the polyp, or there may be associated endometrial carcinoma. The next symptom is the pressure symptom. Depending upon the size, location of the uterine fibroid, it can compress various structures. As we saw, that the most important symptom is that the patient complains of there is heaviness in the lower abdomen, or she feels some lump in the lower abdomen. As most of the fibroids are painless, the patient may report late when the size of the fibroid is quite large enough. And if it is pressing on if suppose it is an anterior wall fibroid, it will compress on the urinary bladder, and the patient will then complain of urgency, frequency, difficulty of emptying the bladder, and even acute urinary retention and incontinence. If there is a posterior wall fibroid, it can cause pressure on the rectum and cause constipation. If it is a fundal fibroid, there would be feeling of abdominal mass without menstrual disturbances or pain. If it is a large fibroid which is on the lateral wall, it can cause ureteric obstruction and hydronephrosis, mostly on the right side because of the anatomy. Large subserous myomas which are pedunculated may cause intermittent intestinal obstruction. And large fibroids may also cause compression of the inferior vena cava, leading to possible deep vein thrombosis of the lower extremities. So these are some of the pressure symptoms depending upon the site of the leiomyoma. Coming to pain, we have said that most of the fibroids are asymptomatic or painless, and they may be diagnosed, underdiagnosed, or discovered on investigation, especially the small ones. The pain may be a feature when there is heavy menstrual bleeding, and pain in the fibroid, pelvic pain, may be in the form of dysmenorrhea also, that is painful menstruation, or dyspareunia also. But some of the fibroids, when they undergo red degeneration, especially in pregnancy, become painful. If the pedunculated fibroid gets twisted or torsion of the pedunculated fibroid occurs, it produces pain. If it gets impacted within the pelvis, if it's large enough to impact the whole of the pelvis or incarceration of the pelvis, then it causes pain. And if there is a submucous myoma which is hanging down and reaches the cervix and causes the cervix to dilate, it causes pain. So these are some of the features which cause pain in case of leiomyoma. The dysmenorrhea which is occurring in such patient is mostly congestive type because there is a lot of pelvic congestion. It can also be spasmodic type of dysmenorrhea when the polyps get excluded or expelled from the uterine cavity. And the pain is in the form of dyspareunia, also pressure of the fibroid. Pain can be because of the associated PID, or pain can be associated endometriosis can cause pain. The fibroids cause distortion of the normal contour of the abdominal wall. The patient may feel that the lower to the umbilicus there is a bulk swelling in the lower abdomen, and that may also justify the removal. If the patient complains of sudden increase in size, you have to see if the sudden of increase in size in the premenopausal age group, then it may be associated pregnancy. And if sudden increase in size is in the postmenopausal age group, it may be sarcomatous change. Coming to reproductive challenges. Fibroids are a challenge to fertility. It may cause infertility or subfertility. Occurrence of both uterine fibroids and subfertility increases with age. Submucosal and intramural fibroids distort the uterine cavity, and depending upon the number, size, location, and fibroids may distort the overall uterine anatomy. It is seen that removal of such fibroids which are distorting the cavity enhances fertility, and 60% of the patients were able to conceive when myomectomy was done. So it proves that they affect the fertility. Fibroids may increase the rates of first and second trimester abortions, and they may also be implicated as a cause of recurrent pregnancy loss. Coming to cellular changes, The cellular biology of myoma reveals certain interesting findings pertaining to infertility. It is seen that the prolactin level was very high in the fibroid tissue, especially in the follicular phase. And it acts as a stimulator of proliferation of myoma cells by nitrogen activated protein kinase cascade. Also, the fibroids have increased aromatase activity, which was strikingly high, and then corresponding myometrium nearly 3 times that converts the estrogen to active estradiol, which promotes fibroid growth. And this aromatase messenger RNA was found in 91% of the cases of myoma, and after myomectomy it was not detectable. Now, how does it produce reproductive challenges or infertility? There are 4 or 5 features to it. One is that the sperm transport is affected. Maybe the cavity is distorted or elongated so that the sperm transport is interfered. Also, the contraction of the uterus is affected by the fibroids, which may affect the sperm transport. The cavity is defective and therefore nidation is affected. Congestion and dilatation of the endometrial venous plexuses cause defective nidation and therefore may be a cause of recurrent abortions or miscarriages. There is atrophy or ulceration of the endometrium over the submucous fibroid and therefore the cavity is affected and therefore defective nidation. Coming to tubal part, the position of the fibroid may be such that it is pressing the corneal portion of the tube and thus producing a corneal block of the tube. The tube may get overstretched or elongated. Suppose in broad ligamentary fibroid, the tube may be so much stretched and elongated that it may become blocked. There may be infection and thus causing flimsy adhesions of the tube and therefore causing block, that is salpingitis. And impingement of the myoma, especially if the myoma is in the endocervical region, it may cause blockage of the cervical canal and therefore may produce a reproductive challenge. Coming to ovaries, there can be associated anovulation, and if it is associated endometriosis, then also the patient becomes infertile, and of course there can be unknown causes. Once the patient becomes pregnant, there are pregnancy-related complications with the fibroids as well. So there can be an acute pain in pregnancy due to degenerative changes, that is basically the red degeneration of the fibroid. The premature rupture of membranes may occur along with the fibroids. And preterm labor may be associated with the patient of leiomyoma. There may be antepartum hemorrhage because of placental abruption. There can be malpresentations because of that. Because of the presence of fibroid, the patient may present with, apart from the vertex, it may be present with any other abnormal presentations. Because there is a reduced space for growth, there may be an intrauterine growth retardation or restriction. Because of degeneration, that is red degeneration, we will be seeing there may be pain. Because of the position of the fibroid or impaction in the pelvic cavity, it may cause a difficult labor. And once the patient has delivered, there may be postpartum retained placenta or postpartum hemorrhage requiring transfusion and puerperal sepsis or inversion of the uterus. Causes of abortion can be disturbed uterine blood flow because of the spiral arterioles. Anatomy is of course distorted and therefore cause abortion. Disturbed contractility of the uterus can cause abortion. Uterus is irritable because of the fibroid and therefore lead to recurrent pregnancy loss. Rapid growth and degeneration of the myoma in the pregnancy causing abortion. Difficult nidation we saw and therefore implantation interference and placental growth and IUGR. Implantation, if occurs on the myoma itself, which is poorly vascularized, of course it would be a failure. Fibroids as such, apart from being painless, they grow very slowly. They grow at a rate of 9% per year. It is seen that they are tumors of reproductive age group, not seen before puberty, and it is not seen after menopause, or they regress after menopause. If there is a rapid growth in the premenopause time, it is pregnancy and not sarcoma. And if it is rapid growth in the postmenopause time with pain and bleeding, then it can be sarcoma, it can be secondary degenerative changes, or it can be infection. So summarizing the fibroid symptoms, it could be heavy bleeding including blood clots, that is heavy menstrual bleeding of AUB. She can have low backache or pain or in the body. Increase in menstrual cramping, that is dysmenorrhea. Pressure symptoms causing frequent urination. Long duration, that is prolonged cycles. Lower abdomen pressure and enlargement and swelling of the abdomen. Now coming to the second part of it, the lecture, that is vascular supply of fibroids. Here in this diagrammatic presentation you see that there are feeding vessels to the fibroid. What you can note is that there is a single vessels most of the time. And secondly, this single vessels is in the periphery of the fibroid. And therefore when you see in the sonography, you put a color on the sonography, you would see the vessels in the periphery of the fibroid. It is named as ring of fire, but it is also found in other conditions. It is not diagnostic of fibroid. So these are the vascular supply to the fibroids. So single large artery is the major blood supply to the fibroids. It sends the nutrient arteries to penetrate the capsule and it reduces vasculature of the, when you see to the vasculature compared to the surrounding myometrium, the vasculature to the fibroid is less. And coming to the fibroid itself, the periphery of the fibroid has more blood vessels and there is a relative avascularity of the fibroid core. There is finding of increased VEGF in fibroids compared to myometrium, and VEGF within the interior of the fibroid may be trapped in biologically inactive fashion within the expanded extracellular matrix of the fibroid. A gene expression, especially targeting the angiogenesis related genes, found a reduced level of angiogenesis promoters and increased expression of collagen. There was a precursor for angiogenesis inhibitor, that is canistatin. This triad of gene expression may explain relative avascular nature of the fibroid. Now when there is a poor vascularity to individual fibroids, this leads to certain changes, and basically these are called as degenerative changes of the fibroid. And it is more seen with the large number of large fibroids where the core doesn't get that much blood supply. Of the various degenerations which occur in the fibroid, the hyaline degeneration is the most common. What occurs is the resulting in a smoother and more homogeneous consistency. With liquefaction, it becomes cystic. There may be fatty change within the fibroid, that is fat is present and it is not a true lipoma. There may be calcium deposition in the fibroid, it is called calcification, and also it is a feature of menopause. Coming to it one by one. So coming to complication of fibroids, we have three types of degeneration, that is hyaline degeneration, cystic degeneration and fatty degeneration. When calcium gets deposited, it becomes calcification. Other secondary changes are atrophy, necrosis, infection and torsion. And coming to the dangerous ones, one is one which I have posted in red, are the sarcomatous change and red degeneration. So these degenerations, apart from that, there is infection, there is atrophy, vascular changes, necrosis in the fibroids and sarcomatous changes. Infection is mostly seen in the submucous fibroids. Of the vascular changes, there may be thrombosis and extravasation of the blood, and necrosis occurs in the center of the myoma and basically more in the subserous ones. So hyaline degeneration. This is the most common type of degeneration found in 65% of the fibroids, affected because of the size of the fibroid, and it affects most of the fibroids except the very tiny ones. It is more in those fibroids which have more of the connective tissues, so it is more in those which are more of the subserous variety. The central part of the tumor is most affected by this type of degeneration, that is hyaline degeneration is seen in the center part of the tumor because it is the least vascular site. The least vascular is the center, so hyaline degeneration starts from the center. As such, the fibroid which was firm initially becomes soft and elastic and becomes the field becomes more soft. When you see on examination, the cut surface shows irregular homogeneous areas with a loss of whorl-like appearance on this. Microscopic examination reveals hyaline changes of both muscle and fibrous tissue. Coming to cystic degeneration, the cystic degeneration is a sequelae of hyaline degeneration. So first the hyaline degeneration occurs and later it becomes cystic. It usually follows menopause, is mostly seen in interstitial fibroids. The cystic spaces are lined by irregular walls, as you can see in this. This is the whole fibroid which has changed, which has cystic spaces in between. The cystic changes can be a finding isolated in one big fibroid. You have to differentiate it from the ovarian cyst or pregnancy. And on ultrasound, they usually see hypoechoic area, but it can be isoechoic or hyperechoic compared to normal myometrium. So this is the picture where the arrows show you that there are cystic changes within the fibroid. This whole thing, if you can appreciate, is the fibroid. This is the cystic changes which are seen in the fibroid. Coming to fat degeneration, this yellow part is what is the fat being deposited. So fat globules in this whorled appearance this is the uterine lining, this is the cervix area, this is the uterine cavity, which if you can appreciate the line area and this is the fibroid which is basically intramural and subserous variety, a huge one with a whorled appearance on cut section, but a part of it has undergone degeneration which is basically yellow in nature, and therefore it seems that the fat globules have been there in this, and this is mostly the change which is seen following menopause. This is the calcific degeneration. You can see the white areas are calcific, the black areas are cystic. So the cystic degeneration is the black areas in the fibroid, and the white areas are the calcific degeneration. So calcific degeneration occurs in the postmenopausal age group, and it is that forms 10% of all degenerations, basically seen in subserous fibroids or pedunculated fibroids which have got a small peduncle, and it is basically a feature of postmenopausal women. Usually there is first a fatty degeneration and then it becomes calcified. The type of calcium is calcium carbonate and phosphate, and when whole of this tumor becomes calcified, it becomes a stone-like mass. It is called as womb stone. The calcification is seen as echogenic foci with shadowing, and it can be conformed to the periphery of the fibroid when it is thought to be a secondary to thrombosed vein from previous degenerations. Calcific degeneration is difficult to distinguish from non-degenerated fibroids, and therefore MRI may be required in such cases. This is a picture of womb stone, that is the fibroid has undergone calcific degeneration. Basically, a postmenopausal age group, calcification of fibroid occurs. These are basically nulliparous women and infertile women, and it has been, the saying goes like this, that fibroids are the rewards of virtue and babies are the fruits of sin. Now coming to the next important degeneration. As you can see, this is a pregnant uterus, and in pregnancy the fibroid which was there has undergone the whorl appearance, which you can see has undergone red degeneration. It has changed its color. Therefore, it is basically because of lots of blood there. So it is red degeneration is the carneous degeneration, also called as carneous degeneration. The cause is probably not known, but probably vascular. What occurs is a coagulative necrosis, that is thrombosis of the blood vessels, and it is not infection. The naked eye appearance shows that the tumor is dark red. It is maybe, some say that it is a raw beef appearance, and there can be cystic spaces in between. The color is due to the presence of hemolyzed red cells of hemoglobin, and if the odor is basically fishy because of the fatty acids. And microscopically you can see evidence of necrosis. The vessels are basically thrombosed, but extravasation of the blood can be seen. So basically it is a complication during pregnancy and in the immediate postpartum period. Basically it is a complication of large fibroids with pregnancy. So during pregnancy and immediate postpartum periods, a large fibroid can undergo red carneous degeneration. The cut surface is raw meat, accumulation of blood is there. Patient can complain with pain, patient can complain with fever. There is sudden growth of the fibroid and the fibroid on field may be tender. The cause may be coagulative necrosis or thrombosis of the blood vessel. Basically, it is a self-limiting disease and not a life-threatening disease. And when there is a recovery, it is called as necrobiosis. So this is basically the red degeneration fibroid. During pregnancy, it becomes tense and tender. And if any fibroid is there pre-pregnancy and the patient along with the pregnancy complains of tenseness and tenderness and causes severe abdominal pain, complains with an inconstitutional upset of low-grade fever, and if you examine there is a leukocytosis with a raised ESR level, you should think of red degeneration. But it is an aseptic condition. Examination of fibroid shows thrombosed vessels and hemolytic changes. We saw that it is self-limiting disease and it would go off after pregnancy. The treatment is basically rest. Partial recovery is possible and it is called as necrobiosis. So how does red degeneration occurs? It is a result of softening of the surrounding supportive tissue. That is, the capsule of the fibroid becomes soft and the supportive tissue becomes soft. This causes the capillaries in the capsule to rupture, and these capillaries which were present in the capsule, when they rupture, the blood diffuses out into the myoma and therefore it gives a red discoloration to the fibroid, and severe acute abdominal pain because there is a collection of blood inside it and restricted to the site of myoma itself, and therefore it causes a red degeneration and pain. Various theories have been put forward that why this red degeneration occurs. It has been said that the fibroids, because of the changes in pregnancy, especially in the first trimester, it outgrows its blood supply. So when there is no blood supply, these changes of red degeneration occurs. Or the blood supply is normal, but because of the growth of the fibroid, there is a kinking of the blood supply to the fibroid, and this leads to necrosis and degeneration. The necrosis is the cause of pain, and also the pain causes release of certain chemicals from the cellular damage within the fibroid, and all these changes leads to cell death, necrosis and pain. The fibroids are diagnosed usually by ultrasound. Degeneration is suspected when the patient complains of pain, and when you scan directly over the fibroid, you will see the degeneration. MRI may be helpful in such cases in diagnosing the degenerating fibroids. Coming to rest of the secondary changes, one of the changes we saw was the atrophy. Atrophy means there is a shrinkage of fibroid. This is basically occurring at menopause when the estrogen support, which is the feature which causes a growth of the fibroid, is lost, and therefore the fibroid decreases in size, and therefore it is called as atrophic change. The circulatory inadequacy may lead to necrosis of this fibroid, more so in subserous and submucous fibroids, and similar reduction may occur following pregnancy. An important change is leiomyosarcoma, that is sarcomatous change, although very less than 0.1% of the cases convert into sarcomatous change or carcinomatous change. What would you see? That is, there is a recurrence of fibroid polyp, there is sudden enlargement of the fibroid, there would be postmenopausal bleeding. These features may give you suspicion that it may be a case of leiomyosarcoma in a postmenopausal lady. That is, she starts bleeding after menopause or complaining of sudden enlargement which were atrophied, and therefore suddenly they start enlarging in a postmenopausal period, or the fibroid polyp which has shrunken starts to reappear. Coming to infection, this is basically a feature of submucous fibroid. The infection gains access via the tumor through the cervical canal. The thin or sloughed out surface of the epithelium of the fibroid gets infected, and this infection can be after delivery or abortion also. Intramural fibroids can also get affected after delivery. So infection can gain access to a fibroid. Another feature is vascular change. There is dilatation of the vessels within the fibroids. It is called as telangiectasis. If the lymphatic vessels are dilated, it is called as lymphangiectasis. It can cause is basically not known, but there may be thrombosis and extravasation of blood. There may be hemorrhage, intracapsular hemorrhage, ruptured surface epithelium, surface veins of submucous, subserous or intraperitoneal fibroid. And one more feature is that there can be polycythemia. It is because of this blood loss, this extravasation, or it can be because of the erythropoietic function by the tumor, that is the altered kidney pressure, or through the ureteric pressure affecting the kidney functions, and therefore erythropoietin is released and causing polycythemia. The last feature is torsion of a subserous pedunculated fibroid can undergo twisting or torsion. So these are the changes of the fibroids. So coming to all degenerations and complications of fibroids, it is divided into degeneration, into sarcomatous change and torsion of the pedicles. Coming to degeneration, to summarize it, red degeneration is basically the disruption of the blood supply to the fibroids, basically a feature of pregnancy. Patient complaining of sudden onset of pain and tenderness with a mild pyrexia and leukocytosis. There can be hyaline changes, degenerative changes, which are the most common. Central necrosis is most common. It can lead to cystic, fatty and mucoid degeneration. All can undergo calcification in menopause. Rarely but can occur is the sarcomatous change. There can be twisted of the pedicles or torsion of the pedicles of a polypoid subserous fibroid. And of course there is an entity called parasitic fibroid or parasitic tumor, where it gets cut off from the pedunculated fibroid, gets cut off from the uterus and finds its vascularity through adhesions. What are the associated changes in the pelvic organs? The shape of the cavity of the uterus is distorted. It becomes asymmetrical. The uterus causes a myohyperplasia, is a constant finding in the uterus. Maybe because of the hyperestrogenism or work hypertrophy of the muscles, and therefore hyperplasia of the muscles of the uterus is seen. The uterus tries to expel anything and everything which is there. Maybe it's blood, maybe it's fetus, and maybe it's fibroid. So it tries to expel it out, and therefore work hypertrophy in an attempt to expel it may be a cause of myohyperplasia of the uterine muscles, and maybe because there is lots of estrogen in it. The endometrium may be of normal types. At times there may be anovulation. There is a dilatation and congestion of the endometrial and venous plexus. The endometrium may become thick, congested and edematous, and the endometrium which is present over the submucous fibroid may become thick, necrotic and infectious. Coming to associated changes of the tubes and ovaries and the ureter, the uterine cavity is elongated and distorted over the fibroids, and therefore the tubes may become overstretched over the fibroid. There can be infection of the tubes associated with the fibroids. The ovaries can become enlarged, congested and studded with multiple cysts because of the hyperestrogenism and anovulation. So there may be small multicystic ovaries may be there. Small cyst in an enlarged multicystic ovary may be there. There may be displacement anatomy of the ureter because of the broad ligament fibroid, and compression effects may cause hydroureter and hydronephrosis. Back pressure changes may be there. There may be increased association of pelvic endometriosis and adenomyosis in these cases. So having completed the symptoms and the complications, there are certain, coming to how would you diagnose it. So when you are diagnosing a fibroid, on general examination you may feel that there is a pallor or lump. The pallor is because of hemimenstrual bleeding, and lump is because of the asymptomatic painless growth of the fibroid. When you do a PV examination, you label it as week size. 10-week size, 12-week size means it is within the cavity of the, so depending upon how do you palpate the pregnancy, you give it a name of 10-week size uterus corresponding to 10-week size fibroid. It may be firm to hard depending upon if there is no degeneration or degeneration. If there is a degeneration, the consistency may become soft. It may be enlarged, single fibroid may have a smooth, or if it is multiple fibroid, you may feel on PV examination a nodular. And depending upon the adhesions which are present, it can be mobile or it can be restricted mobility. The uterus may be seen or felt separate from the mass, that there may be a groove, and cervix moves along with the movement of the tumor. This is a differential diagnosis because it is in continuation with the uterus. So when you move the cervix, it is in continuation with the tumor, and this is a differentiating feature when you see a tumor. So when you do a PV examination, you feel that there is these findings you can see. You can see a lump in abdomen. The patient you can ask for what is the heavy menstrual bleeding, and you do a abdominal vaginal examination, a speculum examination. You take a smear for a pap, and you assess the fibroid size. Then when you are doing such examination, you have to differentiate, you have to keep in mind that there is no pregnancy, that the patient has emptied a bladder, and the size of you are feeling the lump is not because of the full bladder, which is a common mistake which the residents do. Hematometra, pyometria because of the clogged cervix, and therefore there is a collection of blood. Adenomyosis we saw also caused a smooth globular enlargement of the uterus. A bicornuate uterus where there is one cornu of the uterus may be felt as a separate swelling of fibroid. Ectopic pregnancy or teomas. Chronic PID causing pain and malignant or benign tumors of the ovaries come under differential diagnosis of the fibroids. So coming to the imaging modalities, let us see, it will depend upon the number, size and location of the fibroid. It would be depending upon what is the vascularity of the fibroid, and as such it is said that ultrasound is a gold standard. When I talk of gold standard, it means that the most specific investigation which is conclusive evidence of fibroid. So pelvic examination can be done as an investigation. You can do an X-ray, you can do an ultrasound which can be transabdominal or transvaginal. You can resort to CT or MRI, though expensive. A hysteroscopy and a solo salpingography, saline infusion, salpingography and laparoscopy are the other modalities of the treatment. So coming to X-ray are only useful if there is a calcification. See the calcification in a radiograph, and these show that there are stones here. Now stones can be bladder stones, they can be kidney stones, we can be calcified fibroids. So this is because of the plain X-ray. Coming to sonography, this is the gold standard because you diagnose because of that. You can monitor the growth of the fibroid, you can do a pre-operative assessment of sonography. Usually they are hypoechoic. The usual black and white sonography is called as grayscale imaging, and when you put color on it, it is called as color Doppler or flow mapping. There is a duplex Doppler also, and of course when you see the dimensions, more of the dimensions, that is when you see the depth, it can be 3D or 4D ultrasonography. They are usually hypoechoic, but they can be hyper or isoechoic also. If there is calcification, the echogenicity change. If there is a degeneration, the echogenicity changes. So coming to submucosal fibroid, so this is the endometrial cavity which is seeing this black area which you can see, which is delineated by the arrow is this, and there is a submucosal component of the fibroid. So when you put a saline on this, the cavity is enlarged because of the saline, and you can appreciate the submucosal fibroid which is seen by the arrows. Coming to intramural, there is a distorted contour. So this whole thing, this is the bladder here, and so the whole thing, this is the whole of the uterus, this is the uterine cavity, and you can see that this arrow shows the fibroid, and therefore the contour of the fibroid, see the contour, the yellow arrows, the contour of the fibroid is distorted. And see the echogenicity, it is basically hypoechoic with a smooth and fibrous tissue elements. The more of the fibrous tissue elements, the more the echogenicity. See the subserosal fibroid, this is the uterus lying here, this is the cervical area, and this circular area is the subserous fibroid. So this is the uterus here, the uterus lining ends here, this is the uterus here, this is the pedicle, of the fibroid, and this is the pedunculated fibroid on sonography. So characteristic, when you see the characteristic of leiomyoma, this is the uterine cavity, this is the whole of the leiomyoma. So you see the echogenicity. It is hypoechoic, well defined. The contour is it is distorting the whole of the uterus, but as such, it is all of it is hypoechoic. It can be hyperechoic when there is fatty or hyaline degeneration. It can be isoechoic also. The endometrial lining, see the endometrial lining, it can be differentiated, and calcified myomas can show certain shadowing, and cystic degeneration can change the echogenicity. So these are all the images of the ultrasound imaging of the fibroids. This is the whole of it is the myoma. You can see the myoma with the sonosalpingography. These are the pictures of myoma in the this usually the myomas show refractory shadowing if there is a calcification, and this is defined as presence of 3 or more well defined shadowing because of calcification. These are basically echogenic lead points which are presumed to be calcification, and therefore they are not as such diagnostic, but they are usually seen. Histopathologically, these may be correlate with the edges between the smooth muscle wall and the boundaries between the smooth muscle and the fibrous connective tissue. And when you do a KUB X-ray, you can see when you put a dye and put a KUB region X-ray, you can see secondary hydronephrosis or the ureter dilatation because of back pressure. Putting color on it or duplex Doppler, you can see a vascular ring basically denoting that the blood supply comes from the capsule. And if you do, you can do a high velocity color flow, and you can do a 3D or 4D, which of course would be more accurate. So these features show, this is the first diagram is the TVS, that is transvaginal sonography of the fibroid. This is the uterus and this is the myoma. The arrows show in the middle photograph the capsule which surrounds the fibroid. This is the capsule which is in the myoma, and the third one shows the vascular pattern. You see lot of vessels in the capsular area, that is called as vascular sign. So coming to MRI, of course this is not generally required for diagnosis. Most of the diagnosis can be done by ultrasound, which is the gold standard. But of course it can be done for differential diagnosis of other lesions like adenomyosis. If you are not able to locate the fibroids, especially very small ones, less than 5 millimeter in size, which are missed by sonography, or you want a very accurate classification of the lesions in submucosal, intramural or subserosal, and when you do, of course it is the most accurate imaging technique. And when you do, it is basically done if you want to do a surgery, if you want to preserve the fertility, and you have to be very specific, and it is of great value in differentiating pedunculated fibroid from other adnexal masses. So if the patient can afford it, it is costly, and so you can do an MRI imaging. See the MRI picture of a submucosal fibroid. This is a sonographic picture, and this is the MRI picture of the same. So sonography shows a homogeneous smooth fibroid which is enlarged uterus, and when you do, this is the uterus, this is the cavity, and this is the enlarged which has gone degeneration. So coming to MRI, there are of course T1 and T2 weighted images. The cellular myomas have relatively higher signal intensity on T2 weighted images, demonstrate contrast enhancement. And when there are hyaline changes or calcified degeneration, they may be able to differentiate from MRI. So appreciate these MRI images. See how many cystic changes have occurred. These are the cystic degenerations which have occurred in the fibroid, and this is again a fibroid. This shows degeneration in the fibroid. This shows the urinary tract where they have done a KUB of this region, shows dilated ureters and dilated pelvic region of the kidney. That is the fibroid which is impinging on the ureter, especially a broad ligament one, causes back pressure on the ureter, and therefore kidney changes. This is also detail of the MRI, that is T1 and T2 findings, and you can use various contrast medium to differentiate various types of degeneration. So these are the more images which show that this is a fibroid with degeneration. Now this is the uterus with a cavity, this is a fibroid. You can appreciate the capsule, you can see these cystic changes in the fibroid in this image. Now this is a pedunculated fibroid. Here the uterus is there, the cavity you can see, but see when you have put a contrast, the contrast has put a delineated that it is a submucous fibroid. Here the contrast has delineated the capsule. Here the contrast has delineated that it is in the cervix, the cervical fibroid. Here it has shown that it has got certain degenerative changes, and here it is showing the cystic degeneration. So with various types of contrast and plain MRI, you can see the location, size and type of fibroid. Of course, it has a role in treatment because once you do a surgery, pre-surgery and post-surgery, or if you are giving some medical therapy, it helps in monitoring of the lesion. Also useful in predicting and assessing the response to if you are treating it with uterine artery embolization. Pre and post MRI would help you in seeing the response to the treatment, and therefore MRI is basically restricted to not to diagnose but to see the treatment part. CT also is a modality, but usually it is MRI is resorted to, and it can be CT may see some changes of the contour of the uterus or enhancement pattern. Coming to hysteroscopy, when you do a hysteroscopy in such patients, you have an option to see and treat. That is, at one sitting, you can evaluate the submucous size, the submucous myoma. This is the submucous myoma. When you are putting a hysteroscope through the vagina, through the cervix, you can evaluate the size and contour of the cavity. You can see whether there is some concomitant pathology like adenomyosis. You can take a biopsy at that time. You can insert an LNG intrauterine system. You can resect and do a complete surgery of myoma. So these are some of the hysteroscopic images where when you put a scope, you can see a proliferative endometrium, you can see a secretory endometrium, you can appreciate the polyp here, you can see endometrial hyperplasia which goes in favor of malignancy. You can see a submucous fibroid here, you can see a broad base, see the base of the fibroid. Here it is the cavity area and broad base fibroid. You can see endometriotic or see the spots of endometriosis and adenomyosis here, and you can of course have a pregnancy along with it. So these are some of the images which when you put a scope. Coming to the serosal, when you do a laparoscopy, this is the laparoscopy picture. This is a large globular subserous fibroid which is located at the uterine isthmus seen at laparoscopy. Appreciate that it has a capsule, and you can do a myomectomy by removing this capsule. So they are removing, in this picture, that surgery is being done by removing the myoma by removing the pseudocapsule. So you can enucleate the myoma by capsule layer. So laparoscopy is helpful to look into the pathology, rarely used as an investigation because sonography it is an invasive investigation, and associated finding you can see when you are doing a laparoscopy for endometriosis, you can find associated with it a fibroid. So this brings us to the end of the lecture. We will be doing the treatment of the fibroid. In the next lecture would basically medical treatment and surgical treatment, and when you do to surgery there would be myomectomy and hysterectomy. Other modalities are embolization of the uterine arteries, and the new modality is MRI guided ultrasound. So thank you all for patient hearing, and we would open doors to the modalities of treatment in the next lecture. So as discussed, now we will be switching over to we will be ending this session, and I would just run the slides of the quiz, and we will just go through. If you have, I would be on the mic, and you can put your questions on the chat box. I would be doing it as quickly as possible. Most of the answers were displayed at the time of the quiz, but I had some personal WhatsApp messages, and therefore I thought and discussed with the class representative, and we thought that we can just roll over the slides and we can have the answers to it. If someone has any difficulty, you can just put it on the chat box. If I try to unmute both sides, there are a lot of surrounding sounds, so it becomes very difficult if all of you unmute your side, and so let it be voice part from my side and chat side from your side. Thank you all. We finish off here, and we will be discussing treatment in the next sitting on Thursday.